Hey everyone, this is very nice to see you here. We will be starting with the webinar. My name is Stan. Very nice to meet you. I will be sharing my screen, showing the presentation that we've prepared. And I would essentially start from the beginning. So my name is Stan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Interexy. We are 150 plus engineers software house. We're headquartered in Miami, Florida. We have development offices in Poland and Estonia, and we have the presence in Dubai, UAE, which is where I am currently and where I'm doing this webinar from as well. We started as the mobile development agency initially. I'm the iOS engineer in the first place, and several years ago, we went heavily into the blockchain development. We're doing a lot of projects in the blockchain currently as well. And the reason me being in Dubai as well is to essentially speak with the clients and you partners of the company as well. We have a pretty nice growth rate for the company of our type, basically software development agency. We grow at least 3 times each year. And in terms of this year, we're heavily optimizing for the profits in order to be able to do that next year as well. And our clients, they raised 108 million from the projects that we've worked on with them only last year. This year, we had pretty nice raises, pretty nice successes actually as well. I mentioned several things about myself initially. I'm iOS software engineer in the first place, CEO and founder of Interexy. I'm also a blockchain enthusiast. I invest into blockchain a lot. I have a couple blockchain businesses on the side as well. And generally speaking and talking with a lot of people from the Web3 space and just software development businesses as well. So I know the industry, I know the cycles of building the products. I know the pitfalls that people are usually facing with, whether it's the development, whether it's marketing, whether it's product market fit, whether it's planning the fundraising, things like that. And we actually have like some partners in the pipeline and in the process, since over the years, we were trying to set up everything to make sure that we can help our clients with each part in the equation. So for example, like right now, we actively developing the partnerships with the fundraising partners of the company. So we actually help clients to raise the funds for the development of the products as well. So the webinar is divided into parts. We'll have the first topic and the second one as well, which will be followed up by the Q&A session. I encourage everyone to ask questions by voice. I think you will have an option to unmute yourself or ask the host to unmute yourself. And I'm definitely always open to have the conversation about the questions or issues that you have. I expect this call to last about 60 to 75 minutes. I think I would be done with the whole presentation in about 40 to 45. So let's start. The first part is first steps to take when your provider wasted the project budget. I'm very sorry for this. Let me actually close this. First steps to take when your provider wasted the project budget and deliver 0 results. The first one is why this happened, how to prevent it from happening again. The second one is spotting over-promising, high chances of not delivering. The first one is easy and fast check-ins to make sure any product is on point. And the first one is the contract and mitigation. So I would essentially just go point by point. I have the slides with essentially the hints in the process. So why this happened and how to prevent it from happening again, qualification, budget, pre-sale, and contract. So things like that, they unfortunately happen a lot. And there are many providers on the marketplace that don't really understand and know like what are the projects that they can excel at and what are the things that they should be focusing on to be able to really work on the process that is able to deliver the results stably on the time frame. And essentially, people are trying to get different things, different stuff, and they have this mindset that we will figure this out. It's no issues and things like that. Sometimes it essentially works with smaller projects and everything, but sometimes it's unfortunately not. And there are certain things in the process of how you can spot the provider or the development agency that probably won't be the very good fit for the development of the product of yours. Or if you're engaged with someone already, you would be able to raise these concerns during the development process as well. So You might, for example, get some artifacts from them, then see that they don't have certain expertise and try to move on. For example, we recently had a client like that where he was doing a specification with a different company, but it was a blockchain project and Web3 related stuff. He saw that they don't have expertise in Web3 and blockchain, and they were basically learning based on the money on the client. And then he essentially switched to us for the sake of expertise and consultancy in niche, which is really, really important. So basically, if you're careful, if you're focused on the process, by doing certain things, you can often make sure that this won't be the case with you. So the first one is the vendor qualification. That's obviously about the website, about how people are talking to you, about what people say, and essentially the qualification in the industry of the product as well. These are very, very important. So the very, very basic case, if you're speaking with someone, if you want to build like a healthcare project, let's say, and in healthcare, clients are being called patients. And if you're speaking with the software provider and he's using the word clients instead of the word patients, that's something that might raise a small red flag, which you would probably want to check on in terms of whether or not the provider has experiences with compliances, which compliances in which jurisdictions, how he was handling that with the development, previous examples and things like that. So there are a range of things to essentially do to qualify the provider. I would say the most one that essentially influences the result, the success of the project is the qualification of the provider in connection to your industry. Obviously, if the provider is qualified initially about the development technologies and things like that. Second thing is project budget and lowest bidder. So the mistake that potential clients and people in the industry do is they essentially try to go for the lowest bidder, and often it's better not to start with the project overall. Like at this stage, if you don't have enough budget for the development and marketing of the whole thing, then basically to start working with someone that basically just promises the lowest price. This is a very, very important and interesting thing, I would say, and it often depends on what type of plans you have for the product. Like, do you have the investors that you know and who are ready to invest once you just show them the MVP, or you're not in the situation like that, and you would need to essentially spend some money on marketing as well, so you can get some traction. You can send, you can add some users inside the application, inside the product, to actually be able to have something to pitch with. So it depends from the situation to situation. I would say, like, if you are like from scratch with any software build, including marketing expenses and all expenses and like design and all the way, I would say like it's at least 50 to 100K to build MVP and be able to market it to a certain extent, so you would have some leverage to raise with the investors that you don't know at this stage, and specifically with the investors who are investing in the seed or pre-seed stage of the projects as well. But obviously, if you know, if your network good, if you know some people, it might be a different thing as well. Vendor pre-sale process. So this is everything about how the person is talking to you about the project before actually engaged with the contract. And there are essentially a range of things that you can check out, starting from the artifacts that the company is providing to you, and in like how people talk. Do they understand like business communication, I would say, and how they handle like certain issues in the process? And can you really tell that like they're not doing this the first time and they really know what to say and things like that? But I would say like main thing in the pre-sale process is that based on the pre-sale process of the company, you would clearly understand if the company is working with the projects of your size, if you would have a lot of things pre-made and pre-handled, and you would see that people have answers to the questions of yours. you would understand that like probably the project of your size is average to this company, and it's always better to work with a company that has like your project as average projects for the company, because it means that every person, every process in this company would be specifically tied up to handle your projects. If you're coming to to a company with 150K project and they're doing 10, 15K bills, they just won't have processes internally to handle that properly, which will obviously influence the end result of the whole thing. And in terms of the pre-sale process, especially with blockchain healthcare, you would also be able to see based how like the salesperson is talking to you based on the tech leads, if they really know the industry of the product as well. Because with larger projects, that's like a huge differentiator factor for the success as well. Red flags, there are also a range of them. I think we will talk about them a bit further as well, but like over promising, just saying yes, 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 we will do that, and things like that. If you can really see that the person on the other end is like does not care about the project and the success of the whole thing much, it doesn't, I would say, bring a lot of confidence to yourself as well. And the things that I mentioned about the industry and the communication, things like that. So everything should be on point in connection to the size of the project, and it's essentially starting from the certain size of the product. You should not meet or see any huge red flags in the process, to make sure that the provider basically knows the market and knows how to handle the projects like that. The contract as well, this is something that you can check out initially very thoroughly as well, in terms of the deliverables, in terms of what the company is actually promising, in terms of whether it is in connection with what you were told in the pre-sale process and in the process of communication before the project actually started. This also could be a red flag if you see something else on the contract, and these points, they should definitely be clarified. So if something essentially raises the concern, this is a very, very important part to handle as well. Spotting overpromising and high chance of not delivering. So this is something that I see in the industry as well. Usually by the stories that we are provided with from the providers of ours, from the clients of ours who came to us working with different providers, so essentially talking to different providers and things like that. So this is huge for the industry, because for the tech person, it's not, I would say, really hard to start essentially building custom projects. And it's not really hard to start talking to clients about different builds and things like that. But if they can talk about this, it doesn't mean that they have a team they know they've been working on with on many projects, that they have the process to handle larger things and things like that. So spotting this is crucial for the process, and usually when things are documented, it makes everything more safe from both sides. So the first part is vendor pre-contract communication. If someone is saying yes, 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 we will do that, red flag. Work plan. These should be pretty clear in the form of the estimate. And the more you see the vendors understanding the product, not only the estimate, but in the communication with you, the better is obviously for the product as well. There are some businesses like ours, software agencies, that invest a lot into the pre-sale process. That there are some that invest less, but at least from your end, you should have and feel the confidence that the person on the other end really understands the goals that you want to achieve with the product, and he basically sees the set of steps so you can move forward and reach these goals as well. Vendor discovery investigation process. This is pretty huge in terms of, it's very, very good differentiator, because if you really see structured and proper discovery and investigation process with different people, different experts and specialists involved in the process, that's like a huge differentiator right away in terms of who is actually the vendor is serving, mostly what type of companies, and you would be able to spot immediately like what type of projects they're usually working with, what type of things they're handling. Like even like the companies that are working on like tens of millions budget custom projects, they would have a very, very different process from someone who's working on 100 to 100K bills. And usually, even without the prior experience, you would essentially see a difference in the approach, especially if you're speaking with different providers at the same time. Vendor project understanding and problem solving. So this is huge as well. We had like a number of things, a number of cases where even before engaging, we were changing the initial concept with the client because we were proposing ideas and proposing things on how to make the whole thing actually better. So this is key in the process, because this active communication is basically like having free consultation on your concept and your idea from people that are working on something like this on a daily basis, especially if you see the approach coming from the business end, not only the tech one, but actually thinking about the users, about the product, about the product market fit, about the condition of the market, and your segment of the market you would want to go in with the product. This is something you can spot initially as well, and basically take care of too. Using fast check-ins to make sure any product is on point. So I would say this part is these like quick tricks that you can do in the both pre-sale process and in the development process as well, to make sure that you won't be in the situation where a provider was working for months, he used a bunch of funds and nothing is done. So with something like this, you would make sure that it probably won't happen. So during the development process, you might be able to hire a third-party engineer to check out the code of the company that's working with you. If they're saying that they're not sharing the code and things like that, they should be sharing the code once you paid for the milestone of work. Since once you pay, with most companies, you acquire the part of the work done as intellectual property. And you can basically just hire third-party senior engineer, senior developer on a freelance basis. He would be able to check the code out if you don't have technical background, if you don't have like a CTO involved in development of the product as well. And this would be something that would heavily help the whole process as well. And you would be able to spot red flags. And even if this person would raise some concerns, you would be able to ask about them and see the response of the company. And some companies, they might actually screw up somewhere in the process, but if you would spot on these things and show these things to them, you might be able to see on whether or not they're fixing the issue or not. And if they're not fixing the issue, if they are over promising and just feeding you something and the whole thing happening, that's obviously a red flag, and that should be escalated. Regular check-ins with third party. Yep. So this is something that I've mentioned already. One of the things that might help in the process like that is that if you have the development team that you're working with, but you know that the company by itself is bigger, and you see some issues that are not being handled, and you basically just get some excuses from the project manager and development teams like, it's all right, we will fix that and everything. You can try to escalate to the management of the person, to the CEO, to the CTO of the company, write some emails, and these people, they would definitely take care of the issues that you might be having. Getting best of two worlds, cheap plus control and disadvantages of it. So with the check-ins like that, and with the processes, with actively like with third party actively checking on the process, not only from the things that they can show to you, but from the code point of view, I would say it's like 20% of effort that provides 80% of results, as it won't take much time and money, but at the same time you would have more control. But obviously you would have to be a bit more focused on the project as well, if you want to do something like this. But over time, like if it's something like a longer thing, you always would be able to automate and structurize this process as well. So it would only take like 5 to 10 hours of a week from you to essentially see the demo of the product, check out the product for yourself, get the report from the third party about the certain parts of the project and all the things developed, and then based on that solve some things with the company. escalate or basically move on depending on what you have or what you don't have currently. Contract and mitigation. So this is, I would say, the last resort in terms of handling these type of situations. From my experience, they often make more sense if we're speaking about larger bills, so like not 50, 100, 150K, when something is basically going above $500,000 and several millions in terms of the cost of the development. So in some contracts, you can essentially see the clauses for something like this. And in some contracts, you can often, I would say, push the vendor by the contract to make sure, like, to do something. Not most of the vendors would essentially agree to something like this, but this is something you can use to heavily fixate deliverables and things that should be done in the process as well. For that, you would probably need a very, very good lawyer to put it so it can be understood one way in the contract, because any like scope of work, if it's high level, it can be explained and understood in different ways. But yeah, I mean, if you have things like that on the pre-sale process with the contract and you're thinking of these things with the provider, it's probably not the right provider in the first place. So you can do that initially to be very, very safe. But if you feel the urge, the need to do something like that, you would probably have to speak to different providers and choose another one, essentially. Mitigation and when it's worth it. So obviously, it's worth it when you see that there is an option to get something from the company and you won't spend more on the fees in terms of the mitigation process, where you have like a very, very strong position in terms of the contract. Like maybe the provider had committed to deliver this by this time, and the deliverable is clearly outlined, and you can see this on the contract. And usually, yeah, it's about very, like, it's very convenient to have some heavy clauses that you can use essentially to force things quickly without huge spends on the whole like mitigation process and court and things like that. Quick ways to get what you want depending on the provider seniority on the market. So I would say these things, if you're in the situation where something was worked on for months and not delivered, that would usually mean that you've connected yourself with not so experienced provider in the marketplace, because they promised something they can't do, and they were irresponsible about that to you, to them, to themselves as well, and to both of your businesses too. So you can push in some things with the contract, write some notes from the lawyers via email and things like that. Just make them a bit scary in terms of things like that. And for some time, I think you would actually be able to get something from the provider as well. The core thing with this type of situation is to make sure that the source code of the whole application with all the assets is within your control. You have the full access, because if you have this, I would say that you can only waste time in this case, because in terms of money, if you're working with a provider and they've done something, in most cases, you would be able to reuse that. Obviously, if the quality of that thing is not acceptable, but I would talk about this a bit later as well. So yeah, this is the second part, how we can save the situation without wasting a fortune, plus our unique diagnostics and real cases. First point is understanding the context, deadlines, requirements, etc. Second is figuring out how bad the code and the product is. The third one is a prepared process and why it is necessary. And the first one, successful cases from experience. So in this part, we will specifically talk about what to do when you are in this situation already. Our experience with clients coming to us in these situations, and what we've been doing to essentially help them and solve them. I've seen a range of cases, different ones, from small companies with small projects where you can really like redo the whole thing in 1-2 weeks and it's not a big deal, to like startups that were investing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands into like some kind of third-party team with the CTO, or they were hiring in-house CTO. who was, for example, not very proficient in mobile experience. He was coming from the web and he was trying to do it the web way and it was not working, but he had the ego and that's why he was wasting time and money and things like that. Two larger projects where the work was done for months and everything seemed all right, everything seemed to work, but when it all came to launch, there were a bunch of issues and things that led to product not actually being delivered and not actually being launched. So I would essentially share several of these cases from our experience and how we solved them during the point 4. Understand the context, deadlines, requirements, etc. Current situation, why it is bad, what to do, what time do we have left, what budget do we have left. So if you would essentially see the titles in this part of the presentation, that's it's all about the current variables that you have. It's basically like a chessboard and the situation that you have there, because often the founders, they tend to stress a lot about the current situation and sometimes it can be actually pretty easily and fixed and it can be done fast. And in the first place, if you ended up in the situation like this with the current provider, or if you're looking for the provider to fix the situation in the first place, you should definitely check how the person on the other end is talking to you. Does this person have the problem-solving approach, and is he asking these questions essentially? What's the current situation? Why the situation is bad? What can we do at this stage? What time do we have left? And what budget do we have left? What are essentially the requirements? Why do you need this done currently? Is it about the investors' presentations? Is it about new launch and the product server is off and the company is losing revenue in the real time? Is it about some other things? So the first thing is to make sure that you have all the variables and the provider on the other end is understanding the whole situation fully. And I would urge you to be as transparent as you can be about these situations when trying to essentially handle the project to someone else, because we had cases where we were jumping into something like this and several weeks down the road we figure out that backend code is not connecting and the server is on the previous provider and we have a bunch of source code there as well. And the reason why we're not told about this is because the client is in the mitigation process with the provider and they essentially preparing a case for the court, and that's why they were not sharing this information. And if we would, for example, know it like initially, we would take different approach and we would save time and we would save money essentially in solving the situation. So it's very, very important to be very, very transparent in this part as well and make sure that you pass all the information to the provider of yours or to the companies that you are speaking to. Figuring out how bad the code and the product is, check the current code percentage of completion. So you can often think if you don't have technical background, and you can often trust the provider that screwed the whole thing up. He might say that like the product is 70% done, but in reality there were like some front end mock-ups and the backend is being done poorly, it's not connected and things like that, and it's not like 70% done, it's 30% done, for example. And the current provider, he would always obviously try to essentially make sure that that the situation, like describe the situation in a better way, so it won't essentially attack them back in terms of the whole things that happened on the project. So the first thing is to obviously check out the current code and assess the percentage of the completion, not only with the code but overall with the completion of the application. So the provider that you think of handling the project to should check out the whole thing, launch the application. If it's a mobile app, check out the web version, do some requests, do some backend check-ins. Some people, they can actually add QAs in the process as well. More advanced stuff is to run some stress tests and essentially do some testing on the software too, because you might want to spend millions of dollars to essentially do the launch of the project, but you would essentially figure out that the product can't handle, it's not scalable, it can handle larger additions of users at the same time. So these are very, very important things to make sure and to do in the process. Check overall quality of it. So Quality, I would say, it's about two things. It's about optimizing the marketing budgets on the product, and it's about scalability and being able to add to the application as well. First thing, optimize the marketing budgets. From the quality point of view, it's about the quality of the UX and UI and the product and how essentially connected with the front end and with the backend code and things like that. Easy example. So when we have a feed on the application with different views, let's say, for example, when I load the feed first time, when I open the app first time as a user, I can expect it would take more time as I just downloaded the application, things like that. But even in these cases, on my front end, I can check if the user is opening the application first time, and if and when the user is requesting a feed, I might send less news to make sure they would load faster, so I won't hurt the user experience in the first place. And then I can load other things in the background if user starts to scroll, things like that. Then when the user is using the application, he doesn't want to essentially load the whole use pages again. So as a developer, I should make sure that everything that the user loaded already should be stored in the local database in the connection with the application. And once the user is on the use page again, I should show him the old version of the use page, then file the request in the background, check if there have been some new use added on the backend database, and if so, send it to the front end, and front end would essentially update them so it doesn't hurt the user experience of the whole thing. And if you're working with someone junior with the company that like doesn't understand things like that, it would essentially hurt the user experience. And if it's a first-time user, you would increase the chance of them just leaving and deleting the application if they're waiting for 5 seconds to see like the main page of the phone. If it's someone who's using the application, you would see a decrease in retention rates and increase in churn rates. And often you would not understand what basically happened. Like founders, they tend to look more into like marketing issues, and maybe like there is something not properly working with the ads. Maybe I'm working with the different audience. Maybe I should target these people instead of that people. But often it's the quality of the product, and it's how much you actually invest, and how much and like what's the level of experts and specialists that are working on the development of the whole thing. Because like understanding these things, it takes a lot of time to essentially be able to do things properly, and properly developed application like this, it saves a lot in marketing budgets as well, because you would clearly see what are the things, what are the issues, and essentially you would not hurt your churn rates, and you would not hurt your retention rates over time as well. The second part essentially is about the first one was about so we would move on. Once I will remember, I would go back to this. Check stability and performance of the application as well. So if you're talking with someone more senior, they would have an option to use internal tools of the development environments to basically understand the performance of the application, where there are memory leaks, where are the issues that can crash the applications that overloaded at certain times, and overall check the stability of the application, do some stress tests, and make sure the backend of the whole thing is stable as well. Check if it makes sense to continue. So this is a very important thing, as there are certain points where you should make a decision if you should stop the loss or basically continue. And this could only be done after the proper review of someone who had done this before, someone professional, obviously, so you can see the whole thing before your eyes in terms of what the status of the project, or what's the percentage of the completion, what are the error and issues that the product has, what about memory leaks, and what in general this company and these people and these engineers think about what you should do next with the application in connection to the variables that you share before, speaking about timelines, budgets, and why it's urgent currently, whether you have the investor meeting to raise the next round, or it's about the revenue that you lose currently because the application is not stable, and things like that. So and usually in terms of the reports, I would advise to have them at least from like two to three different entities, because some of them, they might just make sure that it's in their interest, unfortunately, and they might just like position the whole thing that like everything is bad, no one is going to work with this code, and we just need to rewrite the whole thing from scratch so that they can charge more. And often it might be the case, but sometimes it's not. What we do and what is the process that we have internally, this is the process that's called APQR, which stands for Application Performance and Quality Review. We do not only do this for the apps, we do this for web-based products as well, just that initially it's called Application Performance and Quality Review. So it's a very, very good sign if you're speaking with the providers and you see that they have processes already to handle the situations like that. Because like if they say, yeah, we can do the audit, we can do this and that, and yeah, it's this talk that I had at the start of the webinar is that people can think that they will be able to figure this out on the go, which often might be a good mindset for the engineer to have, and which a lot of engineers have. But it's always safer to go with someone that you see has processed and had done this before already. So the goal of the whole thing is to assess the clear status of what's happening in connection to the variables that you've provided before, and in the connection essentially to the rate of the completion of the project, to the quality of the code, to the scalability, and essentially things like that. And it's not only about that. It's yeah, as mentioned, it's heavily connected to the final result that you want to have with the product, because after this review with us, when we do it, we provide a whole like several pages conclusion of what we think from our end you should do next with the project and with the product and why. Again, in connection to your situation and things like that. So it's not like only like this part of the code is bad, this UX could be improved and things like that. Essentially consulting, where you're coming to someone and you're getting certain opinions on what to do next. So results and conclusion, that's about the next steps that you can take within the product, and clear next steps and why it's important. So based on this type of reviews with different companies and different specialists, from your end, you would be able to gather the more complete picture of what essentially happened. And it's pretty interesting. It's pretty good if you know, within these processes you can include the previous provider. I can say that's like it's a very rare case. But if that provider, if they like screw the whole thing up and they're trying to help the next providers to essentially understand and figure things out, it also might be a very good addition into the project and into the whole thing. So then basically by having several of these documents and being able to read them and understand them and maybe check them with the third party that I mentioned that was checking the code and knows the project and knows your goals with the project as well, you can clearly assess what to do next as well. I would say that in our cases, it often depends on what was done with the project before and who was the provider that you used to work on the whole thing as well. I would say that around 70 to 60% of cases we redo from scratch. And often it's the best choice. Sometimes it's because like nothing really huge was done and it would be just easier to redo the whole thing from scratch, and it would be more scalable and better and have the better quality overall. Sometimes because the code that's written is like, it's not, you just can't like support the whole thing. It's not scalable, it's not stable. And if we would continue building on that, the whole thing would just fall somewhere at the top. So you can think of this like as a building. If the foundation is bad, doesn't make sense to continue with the building. And in some cases, based on the variables, if the small part needs to be done and it just needs to look shiny in the first place to prepare the whole thing for the race, but after the race, we will be rewriting the whole thing from scratch. And we will definitely have like time for this, then it makes sense to actually finish and then rewrite after the fundraising event would essentially happen. We even had cases where we were assessing ourselves that it's all right to continue with the project right away, not like rewrite the whole thing from scratch. Then we started to essentially continue building and developing the whole thing. And then in the process, we had to understand and we had to admit that we missed something, this is our fault, and we need to rewrite this from scratch because it's just very, very bad. And we didn't see like some companies that essentially started to show up in the process of the actual development. And in these cases, we're essentially taking the responsibility of this part as well. Successful cases from experience. So the first one that comes to mind, it was pretty huge. I won't say the names of the apps and even the functionalities of the apps as most of the things are under NDA. So one of the project, it was done, the client came to us and I think he spent around 300 to 400K already. And the whole thing was done and was not done. And the company on that end, they refused to provide like the backend source code so we can continue on the whole thing. So it was like a mitigation process. He was actually preparing the case for the code as well. And we were figuring things out on the go. So it took like, I think it took around 1 to 1.5 months initially to get the whole picture, the whole thing, understand the whole thing. And then we started rewriting the backend and adding like front-end functionalities in accordance to the specification that was there. It was a huge communication back and forth process, as there were some things that were working and they're not working currently. There were some things that are on the specification, but previous company didn't do them and didn't plan for them and things like that. But eventually we were able to launch the version of the application and even work on the clone of all of the application for the other market and launch it as well. And over time, we were always improving the rest of the front-end code that we had from the previous company as well, but backend it was essentially redone fully. Other case was essentially with someone moving forward with the company that used to overpromise and not deliver. And the company won the project initially by bidding lower than us, but we continued to communicate with the client. And after 9 to 10 months, he basically was in the station when nothing was done. There were some weird excuses from the development team that engineers can't work because they have wedding, and like weddings was like for 2 months or something. After wedding, he went on the vacation and then he couldn't work again. So something very, very interesting. Yeah, we were able to pick up the whole thing. And in that case, we actually decided to rewrite the whole thing from scratch because like the code and essentially it was not a very, very huge project. And the code that was done, it was not something hard to rebuild from scratch and essentially make it better. The other case, it was a very, very divided team. And I think the reason of why the project went that way is because there were a lack of communication and management from the point of the founder. And there were just different people working on different things and they were trying to connect them, but they never managed to really like understand, and they never really cared to basically make the whole thing work. So yeah, it was a huge investigation process of us figuring out that like we don't have these things, we don't have that things, and we need to improve here and there. But we've done the PQR. We actually decided to continue with the development. Then after some time, we saw that we can't, because some companies are missing and we underestimated how much time it would actually take. And we saw that even at that stage, if we would rewrite the whole thing from scratch, it would take less time and money. We proposed that, we took the responsibility, and we essentially redeveloped the whole thing from scratch as well. So yep, I think we're at the Q&A stage. If you have any questions at this stage, you can post them via chat, and you can also click on the microphone button. You would ask to unmute yourself, and we will be able just to have the open conversation and talk as well. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi, everyone. And hello, Stan.
Hi, Angie.
Hi, thank you for this amazing and very useful webinar. I actually have a question regarding your experience. So you've mentioned you are like your positive projects, and do you have any failed projects in the past when you started your company?
Yeah, sure. As a company, we went through different cycles of development and figuring things out. And with the volume that we have currently, with some of the things, I would say things like that, they happened more than where we are on the less major stage of the company, because like currently when we have escalations and things like that, we usually have like people internally and experts to handle the whole things like fast, and it's not escalations that are like being done by months of something going wrong. We usually have process internally to check on things and things like that. But initially, of course, we had cases like that, and we always just wanted to make everything fair, to make sure that client doesn't feel upset about it. The whole thing is in a good place, and we often took responsibility in terms of covering the costs from our end and essentially finishing things, and yeah, just making up for the loss, and often being upfront about some things that like, hey, we won't be able to do this in that time frame as we discussed. We can do this and that. I think that's the key, because like the larger the company grows, the higher is the stake of the development that we do, and the higher is the level of the companies that we are working with. And like right now, it's about large sums of money if we screw something up. So we had to install certain processes to make sure that something like this won't happen.
Oh, thanks for sharing.
Sure, thank you. Let me check the chat actually. Yeah, I think we have no questions on the chat. So if anyone have any questions, I think I will just wait for a couple more minutes. You can unmute yourself, ask to unmute, and we can have the conversation. Or you can essentially check, you can just send something in the chat, and I will answer it that way.
That was a nice overview. Thank you for the yeah, thank you.
Sure, no worries.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, I think we'll wait for one more minute. Yeah, we have something in the chat, I think. All right. So yeah, feel free to reach out to my email. I think we have it on our website. If you have any questions, we will provide a free consultation to people who stayed till the end of the webinar. So you can book a call on the website, just tell that you are from the webinar, and we'll consult you on the project, on the concept, and do the ballpark estimate what it would be with us to handle the whole project from scratch. So you can kind of like understand the whole thing, shop around and do things like that. If you don't have any more questions, thank you for spending this hour of Tuesday evening on the webinar. Feel free to reach out with any questions, and I will see you in 1.5 months from now. Thank you. Bye-bye.